She cried into her wedding dress, but the Mafia boss promised to undress her gently. By candlelight, the silence in the dressing room was heavy, suffocating, and smelling faintly of stale lavender and expensive hairspray. Lily Carter stood before the full-length mirror, her hands trembling so violently that she could not pull the zipper of her gown past the curve of her spine. It was a masterpiece of lace and silk, a dress that cost more than her father had made in 10 years of honest labor. Yet on her frame, it felt less like a garment and more like a shroud. She stared at her own reflection, but the woman staring back looked like a stranger. Her eyes, usually a bright and curious hazel, were rimmed with red and dull with exhaustion. A single tear escaped, cutting a clean path through the layers of foundation her makeup artist had painstakingly applied an hour ago. Lily did not wipe it away. She simply watched it fall, splashing silently onto the white satin bodice. This was not a wedding. It was a transaction. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow, bending her forward until her forehead rested against the cool glass of the mirror. She was 25 years old, and she was being sold. Her mind drifted back, unbidden, to the day the cage had first clicked shut. It had been 6 months ago, in the sterile, fluorescent-lit hallway of Ravenport General Hospital. Her father had suffered a massive stroke, leaving him paralyzed on his left side and requiring round-the-clock care that their insurance refused to cover. The bills had piled up like snowdrifts, burying them under $200,000 of debt within weeks. That was when Brandon Hale had appeared. He had seemed like a miracle at first. He was the CEO of Hale Logistics, a man who wore Italian suits and smiled with perfect, capped teeth. He had been a client of the accounting firm where Lily worked as a junior associate. He had heard of her troubles. He said he wanted to help. He paid the hospital bills. He moved her father into a private care facility with a view of the harbor. But the bill for his kindness came due 3 weeks later. Lily remembered the smell of his cologne, musk and something metallic, as he cornered her in his office. He had closed the blinds. He had placed his hand on her shoulder, his grip just tight enough to bruise. "I have invested a lot in you, Lily," he had said, his voice dropping to a low, terrifying register that never matched his public persona. "It would be a shame if your father had to be moved to a state facility, or worse, if the authorities found those irregularities in your department's ledger." Irregularities he had planted. He did not want a girlfriend. He wanted a wife to complete his image as a respectable pillar of the community. He wanted a possession. And if she tried to leave, he promised to destroy her father's life and frame her for embezzlement. The memory made Lily gasp for air. She gripped the edges of the dressing table, her knuckles turning white. Outside the heavy oak doors of the church, the city of Ravenport hummed with its dual nature. It was a coastal city of sharp contrasts, split down the middle by the gray, churning waters of the Atlantic. On the west side, glittering glass high-rises pierced the clouds, housing hedge funds, tech startups, and the luxury condos of men like Brandon Hale. On the east side, the docks rusted under the salt spray, and the neighborhoods were a maze of crumbling brick and shadowed alleys. It was a city that whispered one name with a mixture of fear and reverence: Moretti. The Moretti crime family had run Ravenport since the Prohibition era. They were ghosts, rumors, the invisible hand that guided the unions and the ports. And at the head of it all was Dante Moretti. Lily squeezed her eyes shut, and another memory surfaced, sharper and more painful than the first. It was a memory of the only time she had ever met the man the city feared. It had been 3 months ago. She'd been leaving the hospital late at night, exhausted after reading to her father. The parking lot was dark, slick with rain. She had fumbled for her keys when a figure detached itself from the shadows of a black sedan. Dante Moretti was taller than she expected, broad-shouldered in a dark wool coat that absorbed the dim street lamplight. He had a scar cutting through his left eyebrow, giving him a perpetually intense expression. But his eyes were what froze her. They were dark, intelligent, and startlingly calm. He had not threatened her. He had simply stood between her and her car, keeping a respectful distance, Brandon Hale is not who you think he is. Miss Carter, Dante had said. His voice was deep, rough like gravel, but lacking the slick cruelty of Brandon's tone. I know who he is, Lily had snapped, clutching her purse like a shield. He is a businessman. He is a launderer, Dante corrected calmly, and he is dangerous. He treats people like assets. Once he owns you, he never sells. Why do you care? She had asked, her heart hammering against her ribs. Because he is moving money that does not belong to him through channels that encroach on my family, Dante said. But mostly because I saw you with your father in the window. You look like a woman walking off a cliff. He had taken a step closer, and for a moment, the scent of rain and tobacco smoke surrounded her. I can help you, he said. I can make the debt go away. I can ensure Brandon never touches you or your father again. And Lily, terrified by the stories of the Moretti brutality, terrified of trading one monster for another, had backed away. She had told him to leave her alone. She had chosen the devil she knew over the wolf in the shadows. Dante had watched her go, his expression unreadable. You are making a mistake, Lily, he had said softly. But when you realize it, remember that not all cages have bars. A sharp knock on the dressing room door shattered the memory. Lily jumped, spinning around just as the door creaked open. It was Jenna, her best friend and maid of honor. Jenna's usually cheerful face was pinched with worry. She wore a floor-length dress of pale pink, a color that looked cheerful and completely wrong for the mood in the room. Lily, honey, Jenna said, closing the door quickly behind her. The coordinator is asking for you. We have 15 minutes. Jenna stopped dead when she saw Lily's face. She rushed forward, grabbing a tissue from the vanity. Oh, sweetie, no, Jenna whispered, dabbing carefully under Lily's eyes. You are going to ruin the mascara. Talk to me. Is it just nerves? Lily looked at her friend. She wanted to scream. She wanted to tell Jenna everything about the threats, the blackmail, the bruises Brandon left on her arm where no one could see. But Brandon had been clear. Tell anyone, and your father dies. I feel like I am marching toward a prison. Jenna, Lily whispered, her voice cracking. Jenna's hands froze. She looked deep into Lily's eyes, and for a second the cheerful facade dropped. Jenna knew. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew this wasn't love. It is not too late, Jenna said, her voice fierce and low. We can leave. My car is out back. We can just drive. Lily shook her head slowly, the hopelessness heavy in her chest. We cannot. He would find us. He owns everything, Jenna. Jenna bit her lip, looking like she wanted to argue, but the heavy organ music began to swell from the sanctuary, vibrating through the floorboards. The beast was hungry. It was time to feed it. Come on, Jenna said, her voice resigned. Let me fix your zipper. Jenna tugged the zipper up. The sound was like the sealing of a body bag. Out in the main sanctuary of St. Jude's Cathedral, the air was cold and smelled of beeswax and old incense. The pews were packed with 300 guests. It was a strange, discordant congregation. On the left side sat the legitimate elite of Ravenport, city council members, bankers, and real estate moguls. On the right side, mingling awkwardly with the socialites, were men with thick necks and suits that strained across their chests, men who looked at the exits more often than the altar. Brandon Hale stood at the front, near the altar. He looked every inch the golden boy. His tuxedo was midnight blue, tailored to perfection. He shook hands with the mayor, laughing at a joke, his grip firm and confident, but his eyes were not smiling. They darted constantly around the room, scanning the faces, checking the shadows near the confessional booths. Keep an eye out for Moretti, Brandon murmured to his head of security, a man named Griggs who stood near the sacristy door. He wouldn't dare show up here, Griggs muttered back, adjusting the earpiece in his ear. He would, Brandon hissed, his smile never wavering as he waved to an elderly aunt. He knows I moved on his shipping lanes last week. He is arrogant. Watch the doors. As if summoned by the mention of his name. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church groaned open. The chatter in the pews dipped in volume, then rippled back up in a wave of hushed whispers. Dante Moretti walked in. He did not look like a gangster. He looked like a king in exile. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad frame with lethal precision. He wore no tie, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, exposing the strong column of his throat. He walked with a fluid, predatory grace, ignoring the gasps and the sudden tension that stiffened the shoulders of Brandon's men. Brandon's smile faltered for a fraction of a second before he recovered. He stepped down from the altar and marched down the aisle to intercept Dante halfway. "This is a private ceremony. Moretti," Brandon said, his voice low enough that the guests couldn't hear the venom, but loud enough to carry a threat. Dante didn't stop until he was a foot away from Brandon. He towered over the groom by 2 inches. "I am aware," Dante replied, his voice a deep rumble that seemed to vibrate in the floor. "I am just here to check on my investment." "Investment?" Brandon scoffed, though his eyes darted nervously to where his security team was moving into position. "I heard you were leveraging your shell companies to pay for all this," Dante said, gesturing vaguely at the vaulted ceiling. "Since I bought a controlling interest in the holding firm yesterday, I technically own the champagne. I thought I would see if it was worth the price. It was a lie, a flimsy, transparent lie." Dante didn't care about shell companies. He was here for one reason, and he didn't care who knew it. Before Brandon could respond, the organ music shifted to the processional. The bridesmaids were lining up. The moment was lost. Brandon glared at Dante. "Sit in the back," Brandon snarled. "And if you make a scene, my men will put you down before you clear the vestibule." Dante smiled, a cold, humorless twisting of his lips. "I would love to see them try." Brandon spun on his heel and returned to the altar. Dante did not sit in the back. He moved to the side, standing in the shadows of a large stone pillar near the front, his arms crossed over his chest. The doors opened again. The bridesmaids began to walk. Back in the vestibule, Lily felt lightheaded. The world was narrowing down to a tunnel of white light. Jenna had gone ahead. Lily was alone. She needed air. She couldn't breathe. Panic clawed at her throat. She turned away from the main doors and stumbled down a narrow side hallway that led to the priest's preparation room. Gasping for breath, she leaned against the cold stone wall, squeezing her eyes shut, trying to force her lungs to expand against the corset of the dress. "You look like you are about to run." The voice came from the shadows at the end of the hall. Lily's eyes snapped open. Dante Moretti stepped out of the gloom. He looked different than he had in the parking lot. In the harsh light of the hospital, he had looked dangerous. Here, in the dim, hallowed light of the church, he looked like Judgment Day. "Dante," she breathed, the name slipping out before she could stop it. "What are you doing here?" He walked toward her, his steps silent on the stone floor. He stopped only when he was close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His presence was a physical weight. "I came to ask you one question," Dante said quietly, "and I need you to answer it honestly. Lily, for once." Lily trembled. He was too close. The air between them crackled with an electricity she didn't understand and didn't have the strength to fight. "Go away," she whispered. "Brandon will see you." "Let him see," Dante said, dismissing the threat with a tilt of his head. He looked down at her, his gaze sweeping over the wedding dress, noting the tear stains she hadn't been able to hide. His expression darkened, a flash of pure anger crossing his face before he controlled it. "Is this really what you want?" he asked. The question hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Lily looked up at him. She wanted to scream no. She wanted to grab the lapels of his expensive suit and beg him to take her away, to hide her, to save her. But the image of her father, helpless in his hospital bed, flashed in her mind. Brandon's promise to destroy him. She swallowed the truth. She built a wall of ice around her heart. Yes, she lied. Her voice was thin, brittle. "I love him." Dante stared at her. He looked at her trembling hands, clenched into fists at her sides. He looked at the terror swimming in her glassy eyes. He saw the lie. He saw the trap. "You are a terrible liar, Lily," he murmured. There was no mockery in his voice, only a profound sadness. He reached out, his hand hovering near her face for a second, as if he wanted to wipe away the tear track, but he pulled back. "If you walk through those doors," Dante said, his voice dropping to a whisper that sounded like a vow, "there is no coming back. He will own you." "He already does," she thought. "Please," she whispered, "just go." Dante held her gaze for 1 second longer, then nodded once, sharply. He stepped back into the shadows of the pillar. "I will be watching," he said. Lily turned and fled back to the vestibule. The wedding march began. The doors swung open, the congregation stood. Lily stepped into the aisle. She didn't see the faces of the guests. She didn't see the flowers. She saw only Brandon at the end of the long red carpet, smiling that predatory smile. He looked like a spider waiting in the center of a very expensive web. She put one foot in front of the other. It felt like walking to the gallows. She was halfway down the aisle when she saw Dante. He was standing by the pillar, his body tense, his eyes not on her, but scanning the upper balcony of the church. Something was wrong. Lily faltered. Brandon's smile tightened. He made a motion with his hand, urging her forward. Then the world exploded. A gunshot cracked through the sanctuary, loud, sharp, and unmistakable. It didn't come from the balcony. It came from the stained glass window directly behind the altar. The glass shattered inward in a shower of colorful rain. A scream ripped through the air as the priest dove for cover. Brandon's head of security took a bullet to the shoulder, spinning around and firing blindly toward the ceiling. "Get down!" someone screamed. Chaos erupted. The wealthy socialites and the hardened criminals reacted instantly, screaming, shoving, diving under the pews. The illusion of civilization vanished, replaced by animal panic. Lily stood frozen in the middle of the aisle, a statue of white lace amidst the madness. She couldn't move. Her brain could not process the violence. She watched, detached, as chunks of plaster rained down from the ceiling where another bullet had struck. Brandon had ducked behind the heavy marble altar, abandoning her. He was shouting into his phone, his face twisted in rage. "Lily!" The shout cut through the noise. She turned. Dante was moving. He wasn't ducking. He wasn't running away. He was sprinting toward her, moving against the tide of fleeing guests. Another shot rang out, chipping the stone floor just inches from her dress. Dante didn't hesitate. He launched himself the last few feet, his momentum carrying him into her. He wrapped one massive arm around her waist and slammed into her, tackling her to the ground. They hit the floor hard. Dante taking the brunt of the impact, his body shielding hers completely. He covered her head with his hand, pressing her face into the wool of his jacket. "Stay down," he roared, his voice vibrating against her ear. Lily lay pinned beneath him, surrounded by the screams of the dying ceremony. She smelled gunpowder and his cologne, sandalwood and rain. Her heart hammered against his chest, for the first time in months, amidst the gunfire and the terror. She felt something she hadn't expected. Safe. Move. The command was not a shout, but a low, guttural growl that vibrated against Lily's spine. Dante Moretti did not wait for her to process the command. He gripped her upper arm, his fingers digging into the silk of her sleeve with bruising force, and hauled her upward. Lily scrambled to her feet, her heels skidding on the polished stone floor now littered with shards of stained glass. The air inside the church was thick with the acrid bite of gunpowder and the high-pitched screams of the wedding guests, who were still scrambling for cover under the pews. "Let me go!" Lily cried out, trying to wrench her arm free. "My father! I cannot leave my father!" Dante did not stop. He shielded her body with his own, moving her forcefully toward a narrow service door to the left of the altar. "Away from the main chaos. Your father is not here." "Lily," Dante snapped, shoving the heavy wooden door open with his shoulder. "He is at the care facility. If you stay here, you are just a target." Lily stumbled into the cool, gray daylight of the side alley, the sudden silence of the outside world jarring after the cacophony inside. A black sedan was idling at the curb, its engine purring like a restrained beast. A driver, a man with a shaved head and a grim expression, threw the back door open the moment he saw them. "I cannot go with you," Lily protested. Planting her feet, the train of her ruined dress was heavy, tangled around her legs like chains. "You are a criminal." Brandon will kill me if I leave with you." Dante turned on her, his eyes blazing with an intensity that silenced her. He grabbed her shoulders, his face inches from hers. "Brandon is not the one shooting at you. Lily, do you think I arranged this? Look at me." Lily froze, staring into his dark, furious eyes. "That was a hit squad," Dante said, his voice dropping to a lethal hiss. "They were aiming for the altar. If I had not pulled you down, you would be bleeding out on that carpet right now. Now get in the car, or stay here and die. It is your choice." A fresh burst of gunfire erupted from inside the church, followed by the shattering of another window. The choice was made for her. Survival instinct, primal and overwhelming, took over. Lily dove into the back seat of the car. Dante slid in right behind her, slamming the door. "Go!" Dante ordered. The car screeched away from the curb, tires smoking against the asphalt, leaving the chaos of the cathedral behind. The drive was a blur of gray streets and rain-streaked windows. Lily sat huddled in the corner of the leather seat, shivering violently. Her mind was racing, trying to piece together the fractured reality of the last 10 minutes. She was supposed to be married. She was supposed to be safe, or at least stabilized in her misery. Now she was in the car of the city's most notorious crime boss, speeding toward an unknown destination. Dante did not speak to her. He was on his phone, barking rapid-fire orders in Italian, his hand raking through his dark hair. He sounded controlled, precise. A general assessing a battlefield, but Lily noticed the tension in his jaw, the white-knuckle grip he had on his phone. They drove for 20 minutes, winding away from the city center and into the quiet, tree-lined streets of the North Hills. It was an older, wealthier neighborhood, but quiet, the kind of place where old money slept undisturbed. The car pulled into the underground garage of a nondescript brick apartment building. "We are here," Dante said, ending his call and turning to her. "Where is here?" Lily asked, her voice trembling. "A place Brandon does not know about," Dante replied. He led her up a private elevator to the top floor. The apartment was nothing like what she had expected. She had imagined a dark, smoke-filled den or a cold, sterile warehouse. Instead, the space was warm, airy, and tastefully furnished. Hardwood floors gleamed under the recessed lighting, and a wall of windows looked out over the rain-swept city skyline. It smelled of lemon oil and old books. Dante locked the heavy steel door behind them, engaging 3 separate deadbolts. "You are safe here," he said, tossing his keys onto a side table. "Safe?" Lily let out a sharp, hysterical laugh. She spun around, the heavy skirts of her dress swishing around her. "I'm kidnapped. You just dragged me out of my own wedding. I saved you from a massacre," Dante corrected, walking into the kitchen to pour a glass of water. He brought it to her, his expression unreadable. "Drink. You are in shock." Lily slapped the glass away. It shattered on the floor, water splashing onto the hem of her dress. "Stop acting like you are the hero," she shouted, the anger finally bubbling over the fear. "You and Brandon are the same. You are just fighting over territory, and I got caught in the middle. Did you plan this? Did you hire those men to ruin the wedding so you could take me?" Dante stared at the shattered glass, then slowly lifted his gaze to hers. His eyes were cold, but there was a flicker of hurt behind them that he quickly masked. "If I wanted to take you, Lily, I would have taken you months ago," he said quietly. "I would not have waited for you to walk down the aisle." "Then who was shooting?" Lily demanded. "The Cortez cartel," Dante said flatly. "They are a rival group from down south. They have been trying to push into Ravenport for a year. Why would they shoot at Brandon? He is a logistics consultant." Dante let out a harsh, dry laugh. "Is that what he told you? A consultant?" He walked over to a desk in the corner of the living room, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a thick manila folder. He threw it onto the coffee table with a heavy thud. "Read it," Dante said. Lily hesitated, looking from the folder to Dante's face. "Read it," he repeated, softer this time. "If you want to know who you almost married—" Lily walked over to the table. Her hands shook as she opened the folder. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and shipping manifests. The first photo showed one of Brandon's warehouses, one Lily recognized from the company newsletter, but in the photo, The crates were open, revealing rows of assault rifles. She flipped the page. Bank transfers, millions of dollars moving through shell companies, Blue Heron Holdings, North Star Imports, Gemini Solutions. Lily gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She knew those names. She had reconciled the accounts for Gemini Solutions just last week. Brandon had told her it was a consulting firm for tech startups, but the ledger in front of her showed payments to known traffickers in Eastern Europe. "He is laundering money," Lily whispered, horror cold in her veins. "He's not just laundering," Dante said, leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. "He's moving product, weapons, sometimes people. And he has been using your firm to clean the cash. He put you on those accounts specifically. Lily, if the feds ever look too closely, your signature is on the audits. You would be the fall guy." Lily felt the room spin. The nausea she had felt in the church returned, violent and overwhelming. She sank onto the sofa, the folder slipping from her fingers. "He told me he was protecting my father," she murmured, tears pricking her eyes again. "He said he paid the medical bills. He paid them with blood money," Dante said mercilessly, "and he probably threatened to stop paying them if you did not marry him. Am I right?" Lily nodded, unable to speak. "He needed a wife to look legitimate." Dante continued, his voice losing its edge, becoming somber. "And he needed a shield. He knew the Cortez family was coming for him. He figured they would not hit him at a high-profile wedding with 300 witnesses. He used you as a bulletproof vest." Lily. The truth settled over her like a heavy blanket. She'd been a pawn, a human shield in a silk dress, outside. The storm that had been threatening all afternoon finally broke. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the window panes, and the lights in the apartment flickered once, twice, and then died. The room plunged into gray gloom. "Great," Dante muttered. He moved through the darkness with the ease of a man used to shadows. A moment later, the scratch of a match flared, and a warm, golden glow bloomed in the center of the room. Dante lit a thick pillar candle, then another, placing them on the coffee table and the mantelpiece. The candlelight softened the sharp angles of the modern apartment. It cast long, dancing shadows against the walls and bathed Lily in a soft, amber glow. She sat on the sofa, looking utterly defeated. The wedding dress, once pristine, was now a wreck. The hem was gray with street grime, the bodice splashed with water and tear stains. In the flickering light, she looked like a fallen angel, beautiful and broken. Dante looked at her, and his expression softened completely. The hard lines around his mouth relaxed. "You cannot sit in that thing all night," he said gently. "It is wet, and it weighs 50 pounds. Lily looked down at the dress. It felt like a suit of armor that had rusted shut. "I do not have anything else to wear," she whispered. "I have some clothes in the bedroom," Dante said. "A sweatshirt, sweatpants. They will be big, but they will be dry." He extended a hand to her. Not a demand this time, an offer. Lily looked at his hand, large, scarred, capable of violence but currently held open in a gesture of peace. She took it. He pulled her up, and for a moment the heavy layers of tulle and silk tangled around her legs, making her stumble. Dante caught her, his hand steadying her by the waist. "Let me help you," he said, his voice dropping to a rough whisper. He turned her around gently. Lily stood before the fireplace, her back to him. The room was silent except for the drumming of the rain against the glass and the soft hiss of the burning wicks. She felt his presence behind her, radiating heat. She felt his hands hover for a second before touching the fabric of her dress. He found the hidden zipper at the base of her spine. "I am going to unzip it," Dante narrated softly, as if he were afraid of startling a wild animal. "Tell me if I hurt you." His knuckles brushed against her skin as he found the tab. A shiver that had nothing to do with the cold raced down Lily's back. He pulled the zipper down slowly. The sound was loud in the quiet room, a long, rasping tear. With every inch he exposed, the corset loosened its suffocating grip on her ribs. Lily inhaled a shaky breath, her chest expanding freely for the first time in 10 hours. Dante's movements were agonizingly slow, reverent. He peeled the lace away from her shoulders. His fingers grazed the nape of her neck. a feather-light touch that sent a jolt of electricity straight to her core. She should be afraid. She was alone in the dark with a man who killed people for a living, but she didn't feel fear. She felt a strange, magnetic pull, a gravity that drew her backward toward him. The dress pooled around her hips. She was left standing in her corset and slip. She felt exposed, vulnerable, yet undeniably seen. Dante did not take advantage of the moment. He did not let his hands wander. He stepped away for a second, the loss of his heat making her miss it immediately. He returned with a soft cashmere throw blanket he had grabbed from the armchair. He draped it over her bare shoulders, pulling it tight around her front, cocooning her. "Better?" he asked, his voice thick. Lily turned around, clutching the blanket to her chest. They were standing inches apart, the candlelight reflected in his dark eyes, making them burn. He was looking at her not as a pawn, not as a victim, but as a woman. There was a charge in the air, a tension so thick it felt like the storm outside had moved into the room. Lily looked at his mouth. She saw his gaze drop to her lips, then flick back up to her eyes. He wanted to kiss her. She realized, with a shock that stole her breath, that she wanted him to, but he didn't. He took a slow step back, putting distance between them. He had promised to be gentle. He had promised not to be like Brandon. "Go change," Dante said, his voice rough. "The bathroom is down the hall. I will find us something to eat." Lily fled to the bathroom, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. 20 minutes later, the atmosphere in the apartment had shifted from high-tension drama to a quiet, domestic intimacy that felt even more dangerous. Lily had scrubbed her face clean of the heavy wedding makeup. She was wearing a pair of gray sweatpants that were rolled up at the ankles and a black t-shirt that hung off one shoulder, smelling faintly of cedar and Dante. She returned to the living room to find Dante sitting on the floor by the coffee table. He had laid out a simple meal, a loaf of crusty bread, a block of sharp cheese, some grapes, and a bottle of red wine he had opened. "It is not a wedding banquet," Dante said, pouring wine into 2 tumblers since the wine glasses were dusty. "But it is food. It is perfect," Lily said, sitting down opposite him on the rug. They ate in silence for a while, the simple act of breaking bread together acting as a truce. The wine was rich and heavy, warming Lily's blood. "Why did you really come to the church?" Lily asked suddenly, breaking the silence. "You knew it was a trap. You knew it was dangerous." Dante looked into his glass, swirling the dark liquid. "Because I knew you were walking into a cage," he said quietly. "I grew up in this life. Lily, my father was a kingpin. I saw what happens to the women who get treated as property in this world. They lose their light, they fade away." He looked up at her, his expression raw. "I saw you at the hospital with your father, months ago. You were reading to him. You looked so tired, but you were still smiling for him. You had a light. Lily, I did not want to see Brandon Hale put that light out." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. No one had ever noticed her like that. Brandon had noticed her looks, her clean audit record, her vulnerability. Dante had noticed her soul. "I felt like I was drowning," Lily admitted, her voice a whisper. "The debt, the threats. I thought if I just gave him what he wanted, he would let us be." "He would never have let you be," Dante said. "Men like Brandon are bottomless pits. You can throw everything you have into them, and they will still demand more." "I am sorry," Lily said. "I judged you. I thought you were the monster." "I am not a saint, Lily," Dante said sharply. "I have done things, bad things. I have hurt people to protect my family. I have expanded an empire built on violence." He leaned forward, the candlelight casting deep shadows across his face. "But I have never lied to you about what I am, and I would never force you to be part of it." Lily looked at him, the scar on his brow, the strength in his hands, the weary honesty in his eyes. In the flickering light, the lines between good and bad blurred. There was only safety and danger. And for the first time, safety looked like the man sitting across from her. She reached out, her fingers brushing against his hand on the table. "Thank you," she said, "for saving me." Dante turned his hand over. interlacing his fingers with hers. His grip was warm, solid. "I will always—" The front door burst open. The sound was like a gunshot in the quiet room. Lily screamed, scrambling backward. Dante was on his feet in a split second, a gun appearing in his hand from the holster at the back of his jeans. But it was not Brandon. It was a young man, barely 20, soaking wet and panting heavily. He wore a leather jacket and looked terrified. "Marco!" Dante lowered the gun but didn't holster it. "What are you doing here? You were supposed to be watching the perimeter." "Boss, we are burned!" Marco gasped, wiping rain from his eyes. "Brandon's men. They are sweeping the grid. They have a hacker tracking the car's GPS. They know we are in the North Hills." Dante swore, a harsh Italian curse. He moved to the window, peering through the blinds. Down on the street, far below, headlights cut through the rain. 3 large SUVs were moving slowly down the block, scanning the buildings. "How close?" Dante asked, turning back to Marco. 2 blocks, maybe 3. They are going door to door." Dante turned to Lily. The softness of the dinner was gone, replaced by the steel of the general. "Grab your shoes," he ordered. Lily scrambled to find the sneakers she had borrowed from Dante's closet. They were huge, but she jammed her feet into them. "Where are we going?" she asked, panic rising in her chest again. "We cannot stay in the city," Dante said, grabbing the folder of evidence and shoving it into his jacket. "Brandon has the police in his pocket and his own private army on the streets. If we stay in Ravenport tonight, we're dead." He grabbed Lily's hand. This time, she didn't pull away. She squeezed back. "We have to run," Dante said. He pulled her toward the door, past the flickering candles, past the ruined wedding dress that lay in a heap on the floor like a ghost of the life she was leaving behind. They ran out into the hallway, toward the emergency stairs, just as the sound of heavy boots echoed in the lobby 3 floors below. The hunt was on. The alley behind the safe house was slick with rain and shadows. Dante moved Lily toward a nondescript gray sedan parked next to a dumpster, a burner car, untraceable and unremarkable. He opened the passenger door for her, his eyes scanning the rooftops and the street corners with a practiced paranoia. "Get in. Keep your head down," he instructed, his voice low and urgent. As they pulled away, weaving through a labyrinth of narrow back streets to avoid the main avenues where Brandon's SUVs were prowling, the reality of their situation settled heavily in the car. "How did they find us?" Lily asked, her hands gripping the safety handle above the door as Dante took a sharp turn. "You said that apartment was safe." "It was," Dante said, his jaw tight. "Only 3 people knew about that location. Marco, my consigliere, and me." Lily looked at his profile, illuminated by the passing streetlights. "What does that mean?" "It means I have a rat," Dante growled, hitting the steering wheel with the palm of his hand. "Someone inside my organization is feeding information to Brandon. That is why the Cortez hit squad knew to attack the church. That is why Brandon knew I was in the North Hills." The implication hung in the air like smoke. They were not just running from an external enemy, they were running from a ghost within the walls. "We are on our own." "Lily," Dante said, glancing at her, "I cannot trust my own men right now. I cannot call for backup. It is just you and me." They drove in silence for a long time, the city of Ravenport fading into a glow in the rearview mirror as they hit the open highway. The landscape shifted from industrial sprawl to rolling hills and dense forests. The rain softened into a steady drizzle. The tension in the car began to shift. The adrenaline of the escape faded, replaced by a strange, quiet intimacy. They were 2 people in a steel bubble, hurtling through the dark. "Where are we going?" Lily asked after an hour, her voice sleepy. "My grandmother's cabin," Dante answered. "It is 3 hours north, near Lake Callan. It is off the books. My father hated the place, so he never used it. The organization does not track it. It is the only place I can think of where no one will be looking." Lily watched him drive. He looked tired. The lines around his eyes were deeper than they had been at the church. He wasn't the invincible crime boss right now. He was a man carrying the weight of a collapsing world. "Tell me about her," Lily said softly. "Your grandmother." Dante blinked, surprised by the question. He relaxed his grip on the wheel slightly. She was Formidable, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. She was 5 feet tall and terrified absolutely no one. She used to make me pasta on Sundays and tell me that if I ever let the business turn me into a monster, she would haunt me. Did she? Lily asked. Haunt you? Dante was silent for a moment. Sometimes, when I have to make the hard calls, I think she would be disappointed in how messy things have gotten. Lily looked out the window. My mother was like that. She made me promise to never let a man tell me who I was. She died when I was 16, I think. I think I disappointed her today. Walking down that aisle, Dante reached over and briefly covered her hand with his. You walked down that aisle to save your father. Lily, that is not weakness. That is a different kind of strength. The touch was brief, but it left a warmth on her skin that lingered long after he pulled away. They arrived at the cabin well past midnight. It was a rustic structure of timber and stone, nestled deep in the woods at the edge of a dark, glass-like lake. The air here was sharp and smelled of pine needles and damp earth. Dante unlocked the door and ushered her inside. The air was stale and cold, but dry. He busied himself checking the windows and lighting a fire in the large stone hearth, while Lily stood in the center of the living room. It was quiet. The silence was profound, lacking the hum of city traffic or the distant wail of sirens. For the first time in months, Lily felt her shoulders drop. No one was watching her. No one was telling her to smile, to stand straighter, to be the perfect accessory. There is a bedroom in the loft, Dante said, dusting ash from his hands. I will take the couch. Get some sleep. Lily. The next few days fell into a rhythm that felt suspended in time. The world outside was hunting them. But here, in the circle of trees, there was a fragile peace. Dante was not idle. He spent the mornings checking the perimeter and chopping wood, his movements efficient and powerful. In the afternoons, he insisted on teaching Lily. I'm not trying to make you a soldier, he said on the second day, leading her to a clearing behind the cabin. He placed a heavy black handgun on a tree stump. But if Brandon finds us, or if something happens to me, I need to know you can protect yourself. Lily stared at the weapon. It looked ugly and lethal against the backdrop of wildflowers. I hate guns, she whispered. I know, Dante said gently, but hatred will not stop a bullet. Respect might... He taught her how to hold it, how to check the safety, how to stand so the recoil wouldn't knock her over. He stood behind her, adjusting her grip, his chest pressing lightly against her back, his breath near her ear. Relax your shoulders, he murmured. Don't fight the weapon, work with it. When she finally fired, the sound cracked through the woods, making birds scatter. She missed the target completely. Again, Dante said patiently. By the third day, she was hitting the tree trunk consistently. She wasn't an expert, but she was no longer helpless. Good, Dante said, nodding as she cleared the chamber like he had taught her. You learn fast. I had to, Lily said, wiping sweat from her forehead. In accounting, if you miss a detail, you get fired. In this, if you miss, you die. Dante looked at her, impressed. The timid girl in the wedding dress was gone. In her place was someone steelier, someone who was beginning to understand the stakes. Evenings were for talking. They cooked simple meals with the canned goods stocked in the pantry. They sat by the fire, the only source of light as they kept the electricity off to avoid drawing attention. Lily told him about the double shifts she worked at the diner to put herself through college, about the nights she spent calculating budgets to the penny so she could buy her father his medication. I never wanted to be rich, she said, staring into the flames. I just wanted to be free of the fear of not having enough. Brandon. He smelled that fear on me. Dante nodded, taking a sip of the cheap whiskey he had found in a cupboard. My father was a king, he said, his voice distant. In his own mind, he built the Moretti Empire on fear. He thought power meant making people afraid of you. When he died, I was 22. I had to take over, or the other families would have butchered us. I tried to change it, he continued, looking at Lily. I moved us away from drugs. I set rules. No women, no children, no collateral damage. But this life, it stains you. You make hard choices to keep the wolves at bay, and one day you look in the mirror and realize you have grown fangs yourself. You are not him, Lily said firmly. You saved me. You could have left me there. Dante looked at her, his eyes dark and intense. I could not. The storm hit on the fourth night. It was a violent, thrashing thing that whipped the lake into whitecaps and hammered the roof with rain. The wind howled through the eaves like a living thing. Lily woke with a gasp, her heart pounding. In her dream, she was back in the church, but the man waiting at the altar wasn't Brandon. It was Dante, and he was bleeding. She couldn't go back to sleep. She climbed down the ladder from the loft, wrapping her blanket around her shoulders. Dante was awake. He was sitting on the worn leather sofa, a map spread out on the coffee table, illuminated by the dying embers of the fire. A glass of whiskey sat untouched near his hand. He looked up as she approached, his face shadowed. "Nightmare?" he asked softly. Lily nodded. She walked over and sat beside him. The sofa was small and their thighs brushed. She didn't pull away. The storm rattled the windows, a loud boom of thunder shaking the floorboards. Lily flinched, instinctively leaning into him. Without hesitation, Dante wrapped his arm around her. He pulled her close, tucking her against his side. It felt solid, grounding. "I used to hate storms," Dante said, his voice a low rumble against her hair. "My grandmother used to say it was just the sky clearing its throat. It feels like the world is ending," Lily whispered. "It is not ending," Dante said. "It is just changing." They sat like that for a long time, the silence between them charging with a new, undeniable energy. The fear of the storm outside was replaced by a different kind of tension inside, the pull of two people who had been thrown together by fate and were realizing they fit. Lily looked up at him. His face was inches away. She saw the conflict in his eyes, the restraint battling with desire. "Dante." She breathed. He looked down at her lips, his hand, which had been resting on her arm, moved up to cup her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw, his touch rough but incredibly gentle. "Lily," he warned, his voice straining. "If we do this, I want to," she whispered. He didn't wait. He lowered his head and kissed her. It wasn't like the polite, cold kisses Brandon had forced on her. This was fire. It was desperate and hungry, born of adrenaline and days of suppressed longing. Lily made a soft sound in her throat and turned into him, her hands tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. Dante groaned, a low sound of surrender, and deepened the kiss. His other hand moved to her waist, pulling her flush against him. For a moment, the world narrowed down to the taste of whiskey and the heat of his skin. Lily felt alive, truly alive, for the first time in years. She wasn't a possession, she was a participant. She pressed closer, her fingers curling into his shirt, wanting to erase the space between them. But then, just as she gasped and clung to him, Dante pulled back. He was breathing hard, his forehead resting against hers. His hands were still on her, possessive but stopping. "No," he whispered, his voice ragged. "Not like this." Lily blinked, dazed, her lips swollen. "What? You are scared." "Lily," Dante said, pulling back enough to look her in the eye. "You are running on adrenaline and trauma. You are grateful because I got you out of there. I feel—" Lily started. "I know what you feel," Dante interrupted gently, "and I feel it too. God. Lily, I have wanted to do that since the moment I saw you in that hospital parking lot." He brushed a strand of hair from her face, his hand trembling slightly. "But I promised you I wasn't Brandon. I won't take advantage of you when you are vulnerable. When we are together, and we will be, if we survive this, I want it to be because you chose it freely. Not because you were afraid of the storm, not because I was the only option." Lily stared at him. Her body was humming with frustration, but her heart was breaking open. He was giving her the one thing Brandon never had, agency. "Okay," she whispered, leaning her head back against his shoulder. "Okay." Dante kissed the top of her head, then wrapped the blanket tighter around her. "Go back to sleep, Lily. I will watch the fire." The next morning, the storm had passed. The lake was still as glass, reflecting a pale, washed-out blue sky. The awkwardness Lily expected wasn't there. Instead, there was a new clarity between them. Dante's restraint had built a bridge of trust that was stronger than any physical intimacy. Lily came downstairs to find Dante making coffee. He looked at her and smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that made her stomach flip. "I was thinking," Lily said, grabbing a mug, "about the rat." Dante's smile faded, replaced by his usual intensity. "What about it? If Brandon knew about the safe house, he must be tracking us digitally. But I have something." She went to her bag, which she had grabbed from the car, and pulled out a small, silver USB drive. Dante frowned. "What is that?" "Before the wedding, I was in Brandon's home office." Lily explained. "He left his laptop open. I copied the encrypted partition of his hard drive. I didn't know what was on it, but I knew he was hiding something." Dante stared at the drive, then at her. "You stole Brandon Hale's personal files?" Lily shrugged, a shy smile playing on her lips. "I am an accountant." "Dante, I know where the bodies are buried, or at least where the receipts for the shovels are." Dante let out a laugh, a loud, startled sound. He took the drive from her, looking at it like it was a diamond. "If this has what I think it has," he said, looking at her with a fierce admiration, "we don't just have leverage, we have a nuke." He walked over to his laptop, which he kept disconnected from the network. "Let's see what you found." Lily Carter. They sat side by side at the small table, plugging the drive in. As the files populated the screen, Dante's eyes widened. Bank accounts in the Caymans, emails to the Cortez cartel detailing the hit on the Moretti shipping lanes, and there, buried in a subfolder, a list of payoffs to local judges and police captains. "This is it," Dante said, scrolling through the documents. "This connects him to everything. The laundering, the trafficking, the attempted murder of my men. This is enough to bring down his entire empire and trigger a federal investigation." He looked at Lily. "You did this. I just copied it," she said. "You just gave us a way to win," Dante corrected. He stood up, pacing the small room, his mind already working on the next move. "We have to go back," he said, stopping and turning to her. "We cannot use this from here. We need to get this to someone who isn't on Brandon's payroll. And we need to get more. This proves the money, but we need to prove the violence. We need the security footage from his warehouse." "Go back to Ravenport?" Lily asked, a chill running down her spine. "Yes," Dante said, "but this time, we are not running. We are hunting." He walked over to her and placed his hands on her shoulders. "Are you with me?" Lily looked at the drive, then at the man who had respected her enough to stop last night, the man who was willing to walk back into the fire to end this. She took a deep breath. "I am with you." The silence of the lakeside cabin, once a sanctuary, had curdled into a suffocating quiet. Dante stood by the window, watching the morning mist roll off the water, his phone dismantled on the table behind him. He turned to Lily, who was sitting on the rug with the stolen USB drive clutched in her hand like a talisman. "We cannot stay here," Dante said, his voice low but final. Lily looked up, her eyes wide. "We are safe here. No one knows where we are." "For now," Dante corrected. "But Brandon is not just looking for a runaway bride anymore. He's looking for a loose end that can destroy him. He will burn down half the state to find us. And while we sit here watching the trees, he is maneuvering." He walked over and knelt beside her, his expression grave. "Your father, Lily." Brandon moved him. Lily went cold. "What?" "My contact in the hospital administration sent a coded message before we went dark," Dante explained gently. "Brandon had your father transferred to a private facility yesterday morning. He controls access. He controls the doctors." Lily felt the blood drain from her face. "He's using him as bait." "Yes," Dante said, "and as long as we are hiding, Brandon holds all the cards. We need to go back. We need to finish what you started with that drive. We need concrete evidence that links him to the violent crimes, not just the money, and we need to get your father out." The drive back to Ravenport was a study in controlled tension. They ditched the sedan 10 miles outside the city limits and switched to a rusted pickup truck left by one of Dante's associates at a roadside motel. Dante wore a grease-stained baseball cap low over his eyes, and Lily huddled in an oversized mechanic's jacket, her hair tucked up. The city skyline loomed ahead, gray and imposing under the overcast sky. It didn't look like home anymore. It looked like a battlefield. "We need to make a stop first," Dante said as they navigated the industrial outskirts. "My apartment," Lily asked. "You need your documents," Dante said. "Passport, birth certificate, anything that proves you exist outside of Brandon Hale's world. If we have to run after this, you need to be able to cross borders." They approached her building from the alley. It was a modest brick walk-up in a gentrifying neighborhood. Dante moved with the fluid, silent grace of a predator, checking corners, listening for the scuff of boots. He picked the back lock in seconds. Inside, the air in Lily's apartment was stale, smelling of old coffee and the wilting flowers Jenna had bought her the week before the wedding. It was frozen in time. A half-drunk mug of tea sat on the counter. Her wedding planning binder lay open on the coffee table. Lily walked through the rooms, feeling like a ghost haunting her own life. The walls seemed to watch her. Every object, the throw pillows, the framed photos, the stack of novels, felt like it belonged to a stranger. That version of Lily, the one who tried to please everyone, the one who thought she could negotiate with a monster, was dead. She grabbed a small fireproof box from her closet and shoved it into her bag. She hesitated by her dresser, her fingers brushing against a silver locket her mother had given her. She clasped it around her neck. "Let's go," she whispered. "This place gives me the creeps." Dante was waiting by the door, his hand resting on the hilt of his gun beneath his jacket. "Good, let's get to work." The plan was high risk, relying on speed and confusion. They drove to a derelict office building on the edge of the financial district, a property Dante owned through 3 layers of shell companies. It had a hardline connection to the city's fiber optic grid, bypassing the wireless networks Brandon might be monitoring. Dante's remaining loyal men, a skeleton crew of 4 who had passed his rigorous vetting, were already in position downtown. "We are ready!" Marco's voice crackled over the secure radio. "Do it," Dante commanded. 2 miles away, outside one of Brandon's legitimate shipping warehouses, a controlled explosion blew the doors off a storage unit. It was noisy, flashy, and designed to draw every police cruiser and private security contractor in a 5-mile radius. "Now, Lily," Dante said, nodding toward the terminal they had set up on a dusty desk. Lily sat down, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. Her hands were shaking. She took a deep breath, visualizing the interface she had used 1,000 times. She wasn't Lily Carter, the victim. She was Lily Carter, the best auditor the firm had ever seen. She typed in her old credentials. "Access denied. He locked my account," she breathed, panic flaring. "Try the administrative back door you told me about," Dante urged, standing behind her, his eyes scanning the street below through the dirty window. Lily bit her lip. She typed a string of code, bypassing the front-end login and accessing the server through the maintenance port used for updates. "Access granted. I am in," she said, the words rushing out on a sigh. "Find the payroll for the security contractors," Dante said. "Cross-reference it with the dates of the attacks on my shipping lanes." Lily's fingers flew across the keys. The screen was a blur of green text on black. She felt the pressure of the seconds ticking by. Every moment she was logged in, Brandon's cybersecurity team had a chance to trace the ping. "Got it," she said. "He paid a shell company called Vanguard Ops $50,000 the day before the church shooting, and another $100,000 the day your warehouse burned down last month. Download it," Dante ordered. The download bar crawled across the screen. 50%, 70%, Dante's radio clicked. "Boss, they are peeling off. Police are heading your way. They trace the signal." "Abort," Dante snapped. "Lily, pull the drive. It is at 90%, Lily cried, staring at the screen. "We have to go. Done." She yanked the drive out just as sirens began to wail in the distance. Dante grabbed her hand, and they ran. They bolted down the back stairwell, bursting out into the alley just as a police cruiser screeched around the corner at the far end of the block. They vanished into the labyrinth of side streets, breathless and alive. An hour later, They were in a backup safe apartment in the South End, a high-rise loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering sprawl of Ravenport. It was modern, cold, and impersonal, but it was secure. Dante locked the door and leaned his forehead against the heavy steel, exhaling a long, shuddering breath. Lily slumped against the wall, sliding down until she hit the floor. Her heart was still hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "We did it," she whispered, holding up the drive. Dante turned to look at her. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a raw, electric vulnerability. He walked over to her, extending a hand to pull her up. "You were incredible," he said, his voice rough. "You did not flinch. I was terrified," Lily admitted, letting him pull her to her feet. "But you did it anyway," Dante murmured. "That is what matters." They stood there in the center of the dark room, illuminated only by the golden glow of the city lights below. The distance between them, usually maintained by propriety and danger, evaporated. The shared survival, the rush of the heist, the knowledge that they were two people standing alone against the world, it all crashed into them at once. Dante's gaze dropped to her mouth. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with a magnetism that made Lily's skin prickle. "Lily," he said, his voice a low rumble. He took a step closer. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw with agonizing slowness. His skin was rough, warm and real. She leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. "I am not a good man." "Lily," Dante whispered, his forehead resting against hers. "I have too much blood on my hands. I cannot offer you a fairy tale. I do not want a fairy tale," Lily whispered back, opening her eyes to look into his. "I had a fairy tale wedding, Dante. It was a lie. This, standing here with you, terrified and alive. This is real?" Dante searched her face, looking for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of the fear she used to have. He found only steady, clear-eyed resolve. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "If we cross this line, I cannot let you go. I will not be able to walk away." "I do not want you to walk away," Lily said firmly. "I want you, not because you saved me, but because you see me. Because when I am with you, I'm not a doll in a glass box. I am me." A groan tore from Dante's throat. He lowered his mouth to hers, and this time, there was no hesitation. The kiss was searing, a collision of pent-up need and desperate relief. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him down, her body molding against the hard planes of his chest. Dante's arms crushed her to him, one hand tangling in her hair, the other pressing against the small of her back. He walked her backward until her legs hit the edge of the bed. He lifted her effortlessly, following her down onto the mattress. The city lights painted shifting patterns of gold and shadow across the room. Dante moved with deliberate tenderness, slowing the pace, honoring the promise he had made to himself. He pulled back, his eyes locking with hers, asking for permission in silence. Lily nodded, her breath hitching. He reached for the hem of her shirt. His hands, usually so lethal, were shaking slightly. He lifted the fabric, his fingers grazing the skin of her waist, leaving trails of fire. "Beautiful," he murmured, tossing the shirt aside. He undressed her slowly, piece by piece, treating her body like a sacred thing. He kissed the hollow of her throat, the slope of her shoulder, the sensitive skin behind her ear. Every touch was a question, and every sigh from her lips was an answer. Lily reached for his shirt, her fingers fumbling with the buttons. He helped her, shrugging the garment off to reveal the scars that mapped his history on his skin. She traced a jagged line on his ribs, leaning forward to press a soft kiss against the old wound. Dante shuddered, his control fraying. He lowered himself over her, bracing his weight on his forearms to keep from crushing her. "Lily." He breathed against her lips. "Dante," she replied, pulling him down. The rest of the world, Brandon, the police, the danger, faded into the background. There was only the friction of skin on skin, the sound of their ragged breathing, and the profound, terrifying intimacy of being completely vulnerable with another human being. It was not a conquering, it was a surrender. mutual and absolute. As the night deepened, the city lights blurred into a soft haze, witnessing two people who had found a sanctuary in each other's arms. The morning sun broke through the floor-to-ceiling windows, harsh and bright. Lily woke slowly, blinking against the light. She was tangled in the sheets, her head resting on Dante's chest. His arm was draped over her waist, holding her even in sleep. She watched the steady rise and fall of his breathing for a moment, feeling a peace she hadn't known was possible. Dante shifted, his eyes opening. He looked at her, and a slow, lazy smile spread across his face. "Good morning," he rasped, his voice thick with sleep. "Good morning," Lily whispered. He tightened his arm around her, pulling her closer. "No regrets?" "None," she said, and she meant it. They lay there for a while, talking quietly. The urgency of the day held at bay for just a few more minutes. "What happens after?" Lily asked, tracing a pattern on his chest. "If we win, if Brandon goes to prison, what do you do?" Dante looked up at the ceiling. "I do not know if I can ever be fully clean," he admitted. "The family, the history, it is deep, but I can change the direction. I can sell the shipping interests. I can move into legitimate construction, build things instead of moving contraband." He looked down at her. "What about you?" "I want a bookstore," Lily said, smiling at the thought. "A small one, with a coffee machine in the back and a cat that sleeps in the window. No ledgers, no corporate accounts, just stories. I would like that," Dante said softly. "I would like to visit that bookstore." "You could do more than visit," Lily said. "You could carry the heavy boxes." Dante laughed, the sound vibrating in his chest. "I think I am qualified for that." The moment was perfect, fragile, hopeful, and perfect. And then the phone on the nightstand buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a priority notification. Dante's face hardened instantly. The lover vanished. The boss returned. He sat up, reaching for the device. He unlocked it, and his expression turned to ice. "What is it?" Lily asked, sitting up, pulling the sheet around her. Dante didn't answer. He turned the phone so she could see. It was a video message. The screen showed a sterile, white room. In the center was a hospital bed. Lily's father lay there, unconscious, hooked up to a ventilator. A man in a surgical mask stood next to the bed, holding a syringe. Brandon walked into the frame. He looked impeccable in a suit, smiling directly at the camera. "Hello?" "Lily," Brandon said. His voice was smooth, conversational. "I assume you are with Mr. Moretti. I assume you think you have been very clever with your little computer tricks." He walked over to the bed and patted her father's hand. "Mr. Carter here has taken a turn for the worse. I am afraid the doctors say his condition is unstable. It would be a tragedy if there was an accidental dosage error. These things happen so easily." Brandon leaned into the camera, his eyes dead and cold. "Come home, Lily, alone, tonight, my tower. If I see a single Moretti soldier, if I smell a cop, your father dies before you make it to the lobby. You have 6 hours to set things right." The video cut to black. Lily stared at the phone, her hands shaking so hard the bed frame rattled. "He's going to kill him," she whispered. "No," Dante said, swinging his legs out of bed and standing up. "He is bluffing. He needs leverage. If he kills your father, he loses his hold on you. He had a syringe." "Dante!" Lily cried, panic rising in her throat. "You saw him. We will get him out," Dante said, pulling on his jeans. "I will call Marco. We will storm the clinic." "We do not know where the clinic is," Lily shouted. "You said it yourself. It is private. It is off the grid. By the time you find it, he will be dead." Dante grabbed his shirt, turning to face her. "I am not letting you go back to him. Lily, that is suicide." "It is my father," Lily screamed, tears streaming down her face. "I cannot let him die for me, and I cannot let you die for him," Dante roared back. He stopped, taking a deep breath, trying to lower the temperature in the room. He walked over to the bed and knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders. "Lily, listen to me. We have the evidence. We can go to the feds today. We can get a warrant, and in the time it takes to get a warrant, Brandon pushes the plunger, Lily said, her voice hollow. Dante looked at her, his eyes pleading. Trust me. Please, give me time to find the location. Do not do anything stupid. He stood up. I need to go to the roof to get a signal to Marco without bouncing off the local towers. Stay here. Do not leave this room. He kissed her forehead, hard. I will fix this, Lily, I promise. He grabbed his phone and walked out the door, locking it from the outside. Lily sat on the bed, the silence of the room pressing in on her. She looked at the city below. She looked at the door. She thought about the bookstore. She thought about Dante's hands on her skin. She thought about a future where she was safe. Then she thought about her father, who had worked himself into the ground to buy her piano lessons, who had held her when her mother died. She knew Dante. He would burn the city down to save her. He would sacrifice his men, his freedom, and his life to keep her safe, and Brandon would kill her father just to spite them. There was only one way to stop the violence. There was only one trade Brandon would accept. Lily stood up. She dressed quickly, her movements mechanical. She found a notepad on the nightstand and a pen. Her hand shook as she wrote, I love you. That is why I have to go. You want to save me, but I need to save him. Please don't come for me. Build the future we talked about. She tore the page off and left it on the pillow where his head had rested. She went to the window. It was a fire escape exit. Dante had locked the front door, but he hadn't barred the window. She climbed out into the cold wind, tears blinding her, and began the descent back into hell. 10 minutes later, Dante returned. I got a lead on the clinic, he said, bursting through the door. Marco says... He stopped. The room was empty. The window was open, the curtains billowing in the draft. Dante walked to the bed. He saw the note. He picked it up, reading the scrawled words. A sound torn from the bottom of his soul ripped through his throat, a roar of pure, agonizing fury and grief. He crumpled the paper in his fist. She had gone back. She had walked right back into the cage to save a ghost. It wasn't a betrayal of love. It was worse. It was a betrayal of their partnership. She still didn't believe she was worth saving. She still believed she was currency to be spent. Dante grabbed his gun from the dresser. His face was a mask of stone, all the softness of the morning gone. She wanted him to build a future? No. He was going to burn Brandon Hale's present to the ground. The lobby of Hale Logistics was a cathedral of glass and steel, soaring 40 stories above the pavement of Ravenport. It smelled of ozone and filtered air, a stark contrast to the scent of rain and desperation Lily had carried with her from the safe house. She walked through the revolving doors, her head held high. Though her legs felt like lead, she was alone. 2 security guards in dark suits materialized from the shadows of the concierge desk before she even reached the elevators. They did not ask for her ID. They knew who she was. They flanked her, heavy hands gripping her elbows. Not gently. Take me to him, Lily said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. They didn't speak. They escorted her into a private elevator that required a retinal scan to open. As the car shot upward, Lily watched the numbers climb, feeling the pressure build in her ears. She touched the silver locket around her neck, a nervous habit, praying that Brandon would not notice the weight of the tiny transmitter hidden inside the filigree work. The doors opened onto the penthouse office. Brandon stood by the floor-to-ceiling window. Looking out over the city he treated as his personal game board. He turned as she entered, a tumbler of amber liquid in his hand. He looked impeccable. His suit was pressed, his hair perfectly styled, his face a mask of polite concern that chilled Lily to the bone. You look terrible, darling, Brandon said, taking a sip of his drink. Lily stood her ground as the guards released her and stepped back to guard the doors. Where is he? She demanded. Where is my father? Brandon sighed, a sound of theatrical disappointment. He walked over to his massive mahogany desk and sat down, gesturing for her to take the leather chair opposite him. Always the drama. Lily. Your father is comfortable. For now. That depends entirely on how this conversation goes. He leaned forward, his eyes turning hard. "I am very disappointed in you, Lily. Running off with a thug like Moretti, a man who shoots up churches. I offered you a life of elegance, and you chose the gutter." "I chose a man who does not blackmail women into marriage," Lily shot back. Brandon laughed. "A cold, dry sound, and look where that choice got you. Back here, begging." He stood up and walked around the desk, leaning against the edge so he loomed over her. "You seem to be under the impression that we are negotiating a return to our previous arrangement," Brandon said softly. "You think you can just put the wedding dress back on and we will pretend this little rebellion never happened?" Lily swallowed hard. "I will marry you. Just let my father go." Brandon shook his head slowly. "I am afraid that ship has sailed. Lily, you see, you are damaged goods now. Everyone saw you run away with him. My reputation cannot sustain a wife who prefers the company of criminals. You are no longer useful to me as a partner." Lily felt a cold knot form in her stomach. "Then what do you want?" Brandon smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing she had ever seen. "Sympathy?" he said. He began to pace, gesturing as if outlining a business proposal. "The city is in chaos. A tragic shootout at a wedding. The bride kidnapped by a notorious mob boss. The groom, heartbroken, searching for his love. It is a compelling narrative. Lily, the public is already eating it up." He stopped in front of her. "But every story needs an ending. And the ending where you come back and we live happily ever after, it is boring. It does not give me the leverage I need to crush Moretti once and for all." He leaned down, whispering in her ear. "But a tragedy. A grieving widower who lost his beautiful bride to the violence of the Moretti family? That gives me the keys to the city. The mayor will give me a task force. The federal agencies will look the other way while I wipe Dante off the map." Lily stared at him, the blood draining from her face as the horror of his plan clicked into place. "You are going to kill me," she whispered. "I am going to stage a car accident," Brandon corrected casually. "A fiery crash during a botched rescue attempt. Very sad. Closed casket. I will cry at your funeral. Lily, I will make sure your father has the best care until he passes away from natural causes shortly after." "You are insane," Lily breathed, shrinking back in the chair. "I am efficient," Brandon said, checking his watch. "Take her to the processing site." The guard stepped forward. Lily tried to scream, to fight, but a heavy hand clamped over her mouth before she could make a sound. "Wait!" she struggled, muffling the words against the leather glove. "Goodbye." "Lily," Brandon said, turning back to the window. "You really should have just said, 'I do.'" 3 miles away, in the back room of a smoky pool hall in Little Italy, Dante Moretti was tearing the world apart. He paced the small room like a caged tiger, his movements sharp and violent. The note Lily had left was crumpled into a tight ball in his fist. "He has her," Dante roared, kicking a wooden chair so hard it splintered against the wall. "He has her, Marco, and I am sitting here like a coward." Marco, his consigliere and oldest friend, stood by the door, his arms crossed. He was a calm man with gray temples and eyes that had seen too much death. "If you hit the tower, Dante, the police will be there in 2 minutes," Marco said, his voice steady. "Brandon has private security on every floor. It will be a bloodbath, and in the confusion, he will kill her." "I don't care about the police," Dante shouted, turning on him. "She went back because she thinks she has to save everyone. She thinks she is expendable. She went back because she loves her father," Marco corrected, "and because she loves you. She knew you would walk into a trap for her." Dante slammed his hand against the wall, breathing heavily. The pain in his chest was worse than any bullet wound. It was fear, pure, unadulterated fear. He had promised to protect her. He had promised she would never have to cry in that dress again. And now she was back in the hands of the man who treated her like livestock. "We have the drive," Dante said, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper. "We have the evidence." Marco nodded. "We do." "Get me Agent Miller," Dante said. Marco's eyes widened slightly. "The Fed?" "Dante, if you bring him in, there is no going back. You will have to give him everything. The routes, the contacts. You will be tearing down half the organization." Dante looked at the crumpled note in his hand. He smoothed it out. looking at her handwriting one last time. Build the future we talked about. I don't care about the organization, Dante said. I care about her. Make the call. 20 minutes later, Dante sat in the back of a parked car under a highway overpass. Rain drummed on the roof. In the front seat sat Agent Miller, a man with a tired face and a cheap suit who'd been trying to nail the Moretti family for 10 years. You are offering me Brandon Hale, Miller said, looking at the USB drive Dante had placed on the dashboard. I am offering you the whole network, Dante said, his voice dead. Hale, the Cortez cartel, the judges on the payroll, and the shipping routes my family has used for 50 years. Miller looked at him suspiciously. And in exchange? Immunity for my men, Dante said, and a coordinated strike, tonight. Miller raised an eyebrow. On who? I don't know yet, Dante admitted, but I will. She is wearing a tracker. You put a tracker on the girl? Miller asked. I gave her a necklace, Dante said. She thinks it is just silver. It has a chip. Miller picked up the drive. He looked at Dante, seeing the desperation in the eyes of a man who usually showed nothing. If this drive is legitimate, Miller said slowly, I can get a tactical team authorized in an hour. But if this is a setup, Moretti. It is not a setup, Dante said. It is a surrender. I am done. Just help me get her out. Miller nodded once. Wait for the signal. The warehouse was damp, smelling of salt water and diesel fuel. It sat on the edge of the abandoned Navy Yard, a sprawling complex of rust and corrugated metal. Lily was thrown into a small holding room that had once been a foreman's office. Her hands were zip-tied in front of her. The door was slammed shut and locked. She stumbled, catching herself against a metal desk. The room was sparse. A broken chair, a stack of rotting pallets, and a computer terminal in the corner that looked like it hadn't been touched in a decade. Outside the frosted glass window, she could hear the guards talking. Boss says the boat will be here at 2200 hours, one voice said. We taking her out to sea? Asked another. Yeah, accident happens on the highway. Body washes up 3 days later. Clean. Lily felt a wave of nausea, but she forced it down. Panic was a luxury she could not afford. Dante had taught her that. Panic kills you, he had said at the cabin. Observation saves you. She took a deep breath, centering herself. She was not a victim. She was a survivor. She looked around the room. The camera in the corner was slowly panning left to right. It had a blind spot directly beneath it. Lily moved. She slid into the blind spot, pressing her back against the cold wall. She looked at her restraints. They were heavy-duty plastic zip ties. Impossible to break with brute force, but the locking mechanism was simple. She scanned the room. On the desk, amidst the dust, was a metal letter opener. It was dull, but the tip was thin. She waited for the camera to pan away, then lunged for the desk. She grabbed the opener and scrambled back to the blind spot. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was sharp. She wedged the tip of the opener into the small tab inside the zip tie's lock. It took 3 tries. She bit her lip until it bled, focusing all her energy on the tiny mechanism. Click. The tie loosened. Lily didn't take it off. She kept it looped around her wrists, hiding the freedom she had just won. She turned her attention to the computer. It was old. A heavy beige box. The screen was dark. Please, she whispered. She pressed the power button. The fan whirred to life with a loud groan that made her freeze. She watched the door. The guards didn't stop talking. The screen flickered on. It prompted for a password. Lily closed her eyes. Thinking back to her time in the accounting department, Brandon was arrogant. He didn't think he needed complex security for the logistics terminals in a dump like this. He used default factory settings for the hardware to save time. She typed in admin, password. The screen flashed blue, access granted. It was a local inventory system, but it was connected to the main Hale logistics network, and that network had an external gateway. She didn't have email access. She didn't have a phone, but she had the command line. Lily's fingers flew across the clacking mechanical keyboard. She opened the network diagnostic tool. It allowed her to ping an IP address to test connectivity. She didn't ping a server. She pinged a specific IP address Dante had made her memorize at the cabin. It was his private, encrypted communication node. In the data packet of the ping, she embedded a text string, Warehouse 4, Navy Yard, Boat 2200. She hit enter. Ping sent. Ping received. Footsteps approached the door. Lily scrambled away from the computer, kicking the power cord out of the wall to kill the screen instantly. She threw herself into the corner, putting her hands back inside the loose zip tie and bowing her head. The door opened. A guard, a massive man with a scar on his neck, stepped in. He looked at her, huddled and trembling. "Stop crying," he grunted. "It will be over soon." He checked the room, glanced at the dark computer, and left. Locking the door again, Lily lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. "Come on." "Dante," she whispered. "In the car under the overpass." Dante's laptop beeped. A single red line of text appeared on the black screen. Source, external node, data, warehouse. 4, Navy Yard, Boat 2200. Dante stared at it, his heart skipping a beat. She did it. He breathed. "She is brilliant." He grabbed the radio. "Miller, we have a location. Navy Yard, Warehouse 4. They are moving her at 10 o'clock. Miller's voice crackled back, crisp and authoritative. "Copy that. SWAT is 5 minutes out. We are setting a perimeter. Do not engage until we are in position." "I am engaging when I get there," Dante snarled. Throwing the car into gear, the Navy Yard was a ghost town of industrial decay. Dante's team, Marco and 3 others in a second car, arrived first. They killed the headlights and rolled to a stop behind a stack of shipping containers 200 yards from the main building. Dante pulled a tactical vest over his dress shirt. He checked his magazine. He felt a cold, deadly calm settle over him. This was the end. One way or another. He looked at Marco. "No shooting unless they shoot first," Dante said. "We need to get close. If they see us too early, they will use her as a shield, or kill her before we get through the door," Marco added grimly. Dante nodded. He crept forward, using the shadows of the cranes and the rusted machinery as cover. The warehouse was lit by floodlights. 2 guards patrolled the perimeter. A sleek motor yacht was idling at the crumbling dock behind the building. "The boat is here," Dante whispered into his headset. "They are getting ready to move." Miller's voice came through. "Federal units are moving in from the north. We need 2 minutes to close the net." "We don't have 2 minutes," Dante hissed. "The back door is opening." Through the scope of his rifle, Dante saw the metal door slide open. Brandon Hale walked out, flanked by 3 men, and in the middle, dragged by her arms, was Lily. She looked small between the guards. Her dress was torn, her hair wild, but her head was up. She was scanning the yard. She was looking for him. Dante's finger tightened on the trigger. "Wait," Marco whispered. Brandon stopped on the dock. He seemed to be arguing with the boat captain. Inside the warehouse, Lily heard the distant wail of sirens. It was faint, carried on the wind, but it was there. Brandon heard it too. He froze, his head snapping up. "Cops!" the captain shouted. "Cast off, now! Get her on the boat!" Brandon screamed. Shoving Lily forward, Lily stumbled. They were at the edge of the dock. The dark water churned below. This was it. She didn't wait for them to throw her. She didn't wait for Dante to save her. As the guard reached to grab her waist, Lily dropped her weight. She spun, ripping her hands free from the loosened zip ties. With all the force she could muster, she drove her palm upward, striking the guard under the chin just as Dante had taught her. The guard's head snapped back. He stumbled, losing his grip. Lily didn't run away. She ran toward the stack of crates near the edge, scrambling up to higher ground. Gunfire erupted. Dante broke from cover, sprinting across the open concrete, his gun roaring. "Lily, get down!" The night exploded into chaos. Federal agents swarmed the fence line, their blue lights painting the shipyard in strobing flashes. Brandon's men returned fire, desperate and trapped. But Dante had eyes only for the woman on the crates. He vaulted a barrier, taking a bullet to his vest that knocked the wind out of him, but he didn't stop. He was a force of nature, a man tearing through hell to reach the only thing that mattered. Lily crouched atop the crate, debris raining down around her. She saw him. He was coming. And for the first time since she had walked into that church, she knew she wasn't just surviving. She was winning. The perimeter of the Navy Yard was a graveyard of rusted steel and silence. But tonight, the shadows were alive. Dante Moretti's men moved with the discipline of ghosts, cutting through the chain-link fences and neutralizing the outer sentries without a sound. They were not there to start a war. They were there to end one. A quarter-mile out, hidden behind the skeletal remains of a dry dock, a line of unmarked black SUVs sat with their engines idling in the dark. Inside the lead vehicle, Agent Miller watched a digital clock on his dashboard count down. Beside him, a laptop screen suddenly flooded with cascading green text. "It is live," a technician said from the back seat. "We just received a massive data packet. Bank routing numbers, video files, shell company ledgers. It is hitting the servers at the DOJ, the FBI, and the state attorney's office simultaneously." Miller grabbed his radio. "That is the signal. All units, move in. This is a federal raid, inside the cavernous warehouse." The air was thick with the smell of diesel and impending violence. Brandon Hale stood near the loading bay doors, his face twisted in a sneer of arrogant triumph. He watched his men scramble to prepare the boat, unaware that the digital ground beneath his feet had already crumbled. He turned toward the crates where his men had cornered Lily. He did not see a woman who had bested his guard. He saw a loose end that needed to be tied. "You think he's going to save you?" Brandon shouted over the rumble of the idling boat engine, his voice echoing off the corrugated metal walls. He taunted her, gesturing wildly with his free hand. "Dante Moretti is a thug. Lily, he will die tonight trying to reach you, or he will live just long enough to see you burn in the media as his tragic victim. I control the narrative." But Brandon was wrong. He controlled nothing. Lily crouched atop a stack of shipping pallets, checked the small silver watch on her wrist. The upload she had triggered from the terminal was complete. She wasn't waiting for a savior. She was waiting for the hammer to drop. Suddenly, the side entrance of the warehouse exploded inward. The heavy steel door flew off its hinges with a deafening screech of metal, twisting through the air before crashing onto the concrete floor. Dante Moretti stepped through the smoke, a silhouette of pure, focused rage. He did not shout. He did not pause. He raised his weapon and fired 2 precise shots, taking out the floodlights above the loading bay, plunging the vast room into disorienting shadows. Chaos erupted. Brandon's private security detail panicked, firing blindly into the darkness. But Dante was already moving, weaving through the maze of crates, closing the distance to the dock with terrifying speed. He wasn't fighting for territory. He was fighting for his life, and his life was huddled on top of those pallets. Lily saw her opening. As the guards turned their attention to Dante's assault, the man nearest to her, the one she had struck earlier, stumbled back, trying to reload his weapon. Lily didn't hesitate. She leaped from the pallet, landing hard on the concrete, but rolling instantly to her feet. She grabbed a heavy iron pry bar that had been left on top of a supply crate. When the guard turned toward the sound of her movement, she swung it with all the strength in her body. The metal connected with his forearm, shattering the bone and sending his gun skittering across the floor. She didn't stop to check on him. She turned and sprinted toward the metal staircase that led to the overhead catwalks. She needed the high ground. She needed to see the whole board. "Lily!" Dante's voice roared from the floor below, raw with desperation. "I am here!" she screamed back, her boots clanging on the metal grates as she ascended. From the vantage point of the catwalk, 30 feet in the air, the warehouse looked like a war zone. She saw Dante taking cover behind a forklift, pinning down 3 of Brandon's men. She saw the federal agents breaching the main doors, their tactical lights cutting through the gloom like lasers. And she saw Brandon. He was running. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the frantic scurrying of a rat on a sinking ship. He was heading for the rear administrative exit on the 2nd level, the only way out that wasn't blocked by Dante or the feds. The only thing standing between him and that door was the catwalk, and Lily. She ran along the narrow metal walkway, her breath tearing at her throat, her torn dress fluttering around her legs. She reached the junction just as Brandon scrambled up the access ladder. He pulled himself onto the grating, panting, his eyes wild. When he looked up and saw her blocking his path, he froze. "Move. "Lily," he hissed, reaching into his jacket for his backup weapon. "No," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it was steady. It was the voice of a woman who had walked through fire and come out forged in steel. Brandon lunged at her. He didn't want to shoot her. He needed her. He grabbed her arm, wrenching her toward him, spinning her around to use her body as a shield against the agents below. "Tell them to back off," he screamed, pressing the barrel of his gun against her temple. "Tell your boyfriend to drop it or I paint the walls with you." Below them, the shooting stopped. Dante stepped out from behind the forklift, his gun raised, aimed directly at Brandon's head, but he couldn't take the shot. Brandon was using her as a human vest. "Drop it, Moretti," Brandon shrieked, his arm tightening around Lily's throat, choking her. Dante's eyes met Lily's. In that split second, a silent communication passed between them. He saw the terror in her eyes. Yes, but he also saw the fire. She wasn't asking for help. She was telling him to wait. Lily's hand moved. She wasn't clawing at Brandon's arm. She was reaching out to the wall beside them. Mounted on the structural pillar was a red emergency panel labeled Port Authority Emergency Broadcast. Brandon didn't notice. He was too busy watching Dante. "I own this city," Brandon shouted, his spit flying against Lily's cheek. "You think you can take me down? I am Heir Logistics. I am the law. You are nothing." Lily wheezed. She slammed her palm against the red button. The effect was instantaneous and overwhelming. Klaxons began to wail, a deafening, rhythmic shriek that drowned out all thought. Emergency strobe lights mounted on every pillar in the warehouse began to flash, blinding and disorienting. But the worst part for Brandon was the audio. Lily had linked the emergency system to the data upload she had prepared, over the warehouse loudspeakers, booming at a volume that shook the teeth. A recorded voice began to play. It was Brandon's voice, taken from the wiretaps on the USB drive. "Move the girls to the container on Dock 4. If they complain, drug them. I don't care if they die. Just keep the shipment moving." The sound of his own crimes, broadcast for the federal agents, for his own men, for Dante, and for the world to hear, shattered Brandon's composure. He flinched, staring up at the speakers in horror. "No!" Lily seized the moment. She drove her elbow backward, driving it deep into Brandon's solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a whoosh. His grip on her loosened. She didn't pull away. She twisted in his grasp, grabbing his wrist, the one holding the gun, and wrenched it upward with a torque that made him scream. She broke free. Shoving him backward, Brandon stumbled, his back hitting the railing. He looked at the agents swarming the floor below. He looked at Dante, who was sprinting toward the stairs. He looked at the woman he had tried to own. His face twisted into a mask of pure hate. He raised the gun, aiming not at Lily, but at Dante, who was exposed on the ladder. "Die!" Brandon screamed. Lily didn't think, she didn't calculate. She launched herself at him. She tackled him around the waist, her momentum driving him sideways. The gun went off, the bullet sparking harmlessly against the metal ceiling, missing Dante by inches, but the recoil and the impact sent them both crashing to the metal grating. Brandon's arm slammed against the steel rail. The gun skittered away, falling through the gap in the floor to the concrete below. A sharp crack echoed, the sound of Brandon's collarbone snapping under the force of the fall. He collapsed, screaming in agony, clutching his shoulder. Lily rolled away from him, gasping for air, her back pressed against the railing. Federal agents swarmed up the stairs, weapons drawn. "Federal agents! Don't move!" Brandon Hale, the golden boy of Ravenport, lay curled in a ball, sobbing over the sound of his own recorded voice confessing to murder. Lily looked up. Dante was there. He hurdled the last few steps, shoving past the agents who tried to stop him. He dropped to his knees beside her, his hands hovering over her, afraid to touch her, afraid she was broken. "Lily," he choked out, his eyes scanning her face, her arms, checking for blood. "I am okay," she whispered, her voice trembling as the adrenaline finally crashed. "Dante, I am okay." He pulled her into his arms. It wasn't a gentle embrace. It was a desperate, crushing hold, as if he were trying to fuse her broken pieces back together with his own strength. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in the scent of rain and survival. "You saved us," he he murmured against her skin, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved us." Down below, they were handcuffing Brandon. The flashing lights painted the walls in blue and red, but up on the catwalk, held tight in the arms of the man who had promised to protect her. Lily finally closed her eyes and let herself cry. Not from fear, but from relief. The interrogation room at the federal building was quiet, a stark contrast to the chaos of the docks. Agent Miller sat across the metal table from Dante Moretti. Dante was not in handcuffs, but he wasn't free. He sat with his stillness, his hands clasped on the table. "We have everything," Miller said, tapping a thick file. "Hale is done. He's looking at life without parole. The trafficking, the money laundering, the attempted murder of a federal witness. He's already trying to cut a deal. But with the broadcast you two arranged, no judge will touch him." Dante nodded once. "Good. Now, about you," Miller said, leaning back. "You gave us the network. You gave us the routes. You handed us the Cortez cartel on a silver platter. I told you I would," Dante said. Miller sighed. "The Department of Justice is willing to offer you a deal. Witness protection is off the table. You are too high profile. But if you agree to testify, and if you agree to the complete dismantling of the Moretti criminal operations, we can talk about a suspended sentence, probation, heavy monitoring." Dante looked at the two-way mirror. He knew Lily was on the other side, watching. "I am done with the life, Miller," Dante said quietly. "I will sell the shipping interests. I will close the clubs. I will give you the names you need to clean up the city." "And what will you do?" Miller asked. "A man like you does not just retire. I am going to build things," Dante said, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Legitimate construction, schools, libraries, foundations that actually hold up." Miller studied him for a long moment, then extended his hand. "Do not make me regret this. Moretti." "I won't," Dante said, shaking it. "I have a reason to stay clean now." 6 weeks later, the autumn air was crisp, smelling of fallen leaves and wood smoke. The small townhouse on the outskirts of Ravenport was modest, a far cry from the penthouse suites and marble mansions of their past lives. It had a small garden in the front and a porch that needed painting. To Lily, it looked like a castle. She stood in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for a stew. Her father was safe, living in a specialized care facility in Vermont under a new name, paid for by the Witness Protection Fund. She spoke to him every Sunday. He was regaining his speech. He remembered her. The lights in the kitchen flickered as the wind picked up outside. Lily paused. Knife in midair. She smiled. She put the knife down and went to the drawer. She pulled out a box of long, white taper candles. She moved through the small living room, striking matches, one by one. The flames danced to life, casting a warm, golden glow against the cream-colored walls. She turned off the electric lamps. She looked down at her dress. It was soft cotton, off-white, loose and comfortable. It moved with her, not against her. It was a choice she had made that morning, reclaiming the color that Brandon had tried to turn into a uniform of submission. The front door opened. Dante stepped in. Shaking rain from his coat, he looked tired. His construction crew had been pouring concrete for the new community center all day. He wore work boots and jeans, his hands rough and calloused from honest labor. He stopped when he saw the room. The candlelight flickered, reflecting in his dark eyes. He looked at the table set for two. He looked at Lily, standing in the center of the glow, looking at him with a heart full of peace. He hung up his coat slowly. The ankle monitor under his jeans beeped once, a reminder of his constraints, but he didn't seem to hear it. He walked toward her, the floorboards creaking softly. He stopped a foot away, the heat of his body radiating toward her. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice husky. Lily reached out and took his hand. His knuckles were scraped. She brought his hand to her lips and kissed the rough skin. "I made dinner," she said softly. Dante didn't look at the food. He couldn't take his eyes off her. He reached out and touched a lock of hair that had fallen near her face, tucking it behind her ear. His touch was reverent. "Do you remember what I promised you?" he asked. his voice dropping to a whisper that seemed to blend with the shadows. Lily nodded, her breath hitching slightly. "I remember. I told you that you never had to cry into a wedding dress again," Dante murmured, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw. He stepped closer, closing the gap. His other hand settled on her waist, warm and heavy. "And I promised," he continued, his eyes searching hers, asking for permission, "that I would undress you gently, by candlelight." Lily's heart beat a slow, steady rhythm against his chest. There was no fear, no coercion, only the profound, quiet thrill of a love that had been tested by fire and survived. "Yes," she whispered. Dante moved slowly. He turned her around, his movements unhurried. He found the buttons at the back of her soft dress. He undid the first one. He kissed the skin he exposed at the nape of her neck. He undid the second. He kissed her shoulder. "I am so proud of you, Lily," he whispered against her skin. "You are the bravest person I have ever known." The dress slid from her shoulders, pooling on the floor like a white cloud. Lily turned in his arms, pressing herself against him. They stood in the center of their own home, surrounded by the flickering light of 100 candles. Dante cupped her face in his hands. He kissed her, slow and deep, a kiss that tasted of promises kept and a future earned. As they sank onto the rug together, the shadows dancing over their intertwined bodies, the darkness outside the window didn't matter. They had made their own light. "Thank you so much for listening to this story." She cried into her wedding dress, but the Mafia boss promised to undress her gently by candlelight. I hope you enjoyed the journey of Lily and Dante as they found courage, justice, and love in the midst of danger. It was a pleasure to bring this story to life for you. I would love to hear from you. Please leave a comment below letting me know where you are listening from in the world. Did you like the ending? What was your favorite part of their journey? If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to the Mafia Romance Stories channel for more passionate and emotional tales. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in English in the comments section. Your support means the world to me. Until next time, keep believing in love.